Welcome to the Everything Epigenetics podcast, where we discuss DNA regulation and the insights it can tell you about your health. My name's Hannah Wendt, and I'm the founder of Everything Epigenetics. Today, my guest is Dr. Katherine Zagone, and we are focusing on epigenetics and fertility. I'm super excited about this one. I feel like I say that every single time, but I truly think I could sit down and talk with Dr. Zagone for hours. We really chat about her discovery and journey into the fertility world and what she's doing now on her day-to-day. We even talk, of course, about how she's been an early adopter and seeing the potential of epigenetic biomarkers and fertility predictions. So we talk about how those markers are linked to fertility and what even epigenetics can tell us about fertility. She has a company called Clockwize as well, where she offers a Fertility Wise Test that looks at biological age, how fast you're aging, even the exposure to fertility toxins. So your bisphenols, your phthalates, your parabens, through their proprietary ClockTox panel. So we go into all of those outcomes, biological aging and pace of aging very, very briefly, but we actually dive into the fertility toxins she's able to predict and what you can do about those. Then we also speak about their FAST framework to start rewinding this biological age clock and increase your fertility. The FAST framework actually stands for F is for food, fasting, fitness, A is for associated conditions, S is for sleep, stress, supplements, and then the T for trauma and toxins. So we dive into each of those categories and talk about exactly what you can do to help optimize your fertility, both men and women, which I think is really important to know. She even shares some of her success stories between actually herself and her co-founder of Clockwize as well. Dr. Zagone is a licensed naturopathic doctor, and she focuses primarily on natural women's health, fertility, and family wellness. And as I mentioned, she is also the founder of Clockwize, which is dedicated to supporting women in optimizing and extending their reproductive windows through accessible testing, education, empowerment, and even data integration. She also runs Gentera Center for Precision Medicine in Beverly Hills, California, where she bridges cutting-edge science with tried and true methods for exceptional results. She's super excited to bring effective science, a warm heart, and an industry-changing approach to the world through Clockwize. Again, she's really been supporting women and couples easily conceive their healthiest babies for almost a decade now. And now for my guest, Dr. Katherine Zagone. Welcome to the Everything Epigenetics podcast, Dr. Zagone. I am super excited to have you today.
Awesome, Hannah. Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Cool. Let's get right into it. I want to start off this episode a little bit differently with almost like a state of the union, you could say, on reproductive longevity and how it disproportionately affects women. So stick with me here for a couple minutes. The state of reproductive longevity really remains a huge challenge for many women, right? Like I mentioned, it disproportionately affects women compared to men. And one of the really big factors that contributes to this is the decline, obviously, in reproductive longevity, being age, right? As women age, their fertility declines, the risk of pregnancy complications increases. So this makes it a lot more difficult for women to conceive, carry a pregnancy to term, and, particularly for those who delay childbearing until later in life. And that's really not all. That's only one part of it. There's a ton of health conditions that can affect reproductive longevity, including PCOS, endometriosis, other hormonal imbalances as well. So there are a lot of barriers or conditions, different things that make it more difficult for women to conceive and can actually really increase the risk of pregnancy complications. The last challenge I'm going to mention in terms of reproductive longevity is access to healthcare and support, or talking about it, having conversations like the one we're going to have today. So women who actually lack access to this type of healthcare, they may not receive screening, diagnoses, treatment that they actually need to maintain their reproductive health. So this includes, access to contraception, fertility treatments, other interventions that can really just help support reproductive longevity in women. And again, this affects women more than men, both in terms of impact on their health, well-being, and then the broader and social economic implications too. For example, women who experience difficulty conceiving or carrying a pregnancy to term may face a lot of emotional, social, financial burdens that we really don't talk about. And then in addition, there's a decline in birth rates in many countries, right? This can have an even bigger impact on society itself, especially as as the population continue to age. So all of that being said, we know there's a huge growing recognition of the importance in reproductive longevity and how there are a lot of efforts to be made to improve this access to reproductive health care and support for women. There's still a lot of work to be done to ensure that all women have access to these resources and support they need to maintain their reproductive health throughout their lives. So with all of that being said, that's why I'm super excited to have Dr. Zagone on today. I know she talks about this regularly. And she even has an epigenetic testing company herself named Clockwize that we'll talk about later, where she's using epigenetic data to actually tell people the truth about fertility and particularly aging. So, Dr. Zagone, tell us first how you got into the fertility world and what you spend most of your day-to-day on even now.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Hannah. And thank you for the state of fertility address. That was great. So I'm trained as a naturopathic physician, and my focus in practice, I've been in practice over a decade now, has always been women's health and fertility. And that was inspired by a few things. One, growing up, I watched my mom heal herself naturally. And so that was like my impetus to explore natural medicine. And so I knew I wanted to be a naturopathic doctor. And when I was in college doing my undergrad, I already had this lens of focusing more on the physiology and how do we restore physiology as opposed to suppressing or cutting out pathology. And while I was in college, I witnessed my aunt and uncle actually struggle with infertility for, I think it was like 7 years, and had done multiple rounds of IVF. And they have a happy ending. They have 3 beautiful girls now who are like not almost adults, but maybe teenagers at this point. And they were both in the conventional medical world, and so went the conventional medical route. And so I kept asking the question to myself, really, until I got into naturopathic school of, what else could we do? What else could we look at? Like, why are people struggling? Like, why, what is it? Like, it's not a deficiency of IVF. It's not and so I kind of went in super curious. And so when I started naturopathic medical school, that was really my focus of like, what is fertility? And what I have found is that fertility is in almost every case, a byproduct of health. And that means that it's also improvable and modifiable and changeable. And so that's, where that focus came in for me. And part of my story is also, I thought I wanted to be a midwife for a little while. Because I've just loved like the babies and the birth and feel like that's such an important part of our start to who we are and our start to our health and life. And I very quickly realized I don't like staying up all night, and was like, so how can I impact this population? Like, how can I support health before it's even an issue? Like, how could truly preventive health starts before conception? And so as, in the learning about all the fertility stuff, and then also learning about epigenetics and transgenerational epigenetics, and realizing like, oh, everything that mom and dad eat, drink, breathe, touch, think, and feel 3 to 4 months, sometimes longer before they conceive, can impact that baby's health for the rest of their life. This feels like where I can make the most impact. And so I went into fertility, both focusing on how do we restore fertility for couples who are struggling, but then also how do we optimize mom and dad so that they can set that baby up and invest in that baby's health future before they're even conceived.
Yeah. That's an awesome story. Thank you. And then what are you doing now, like day to day?
Day to day, so I see patients a couple of days a week via telehealth, and I work on Clockwize the rest of the time. So yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, I love it. No, I can just tell how passionate you are about it. Like even you just mentioning, I've always been curious, even like while you were growing up. I can just tell, you're an early adopter in that way, right? If we stay curious, we're trying to learn why, we're trying to figure out, not only what's happening during pregnancy, but even beforehand, right? We have the ability to really optimize our bodies beforehand. Actually, even this morning, I get all of these Google alerts, right? The articles sent to me that have the keywords like epigenetics, DNA methylation, biological aging in them. The one this morning was just full of so many articles in terms of how cannabis consumption can affect, kind of the mother, right, up until birth. So there was a lot of information. That was just like an interesting thing I saw this morning as I was scrolling through. So super interested in all the transgenerational epigenetic inheritance and, what we can pass on to our children. And it's like, how long do you have to stop or change some of the things that you're doing? So I think there are still a ton of questions. But I know you in particular mentioned you've just really seen the potential of epigenetic biomarkers, right? And I know you're personally super interested in like the research and development. Can you describe to our listeners how epigenetic markers are linked to fertility in general and really what epigenetics can tell us about fertility?
Yeah. So the way Clockwise is working with epigenetics right now, and there's a lot of directions we could go just under epigenetics. So what we're doing is we're using the aging algorithm, looking at DNA methylation using epigenetics to give that biological age. And what we have found both in the research and in my practice is that biological age in most cases is more important for fertility outcomes than chronological age. So women are waiting longer to conceive. This is an amazing thing in a lot of ways. We're more career stable, emotionally stable, financially stable. There's even studies showing that like babies born to older moms have all these benefits, right? But our biology hasn't quite caught up. So I'm working on that piece. But by looking at biological age and the age of our cells, the age of that our DNA is actually saying that we are, we get a picture of our fertility that we don't really get just through hormones or just through inflammatory markers or just through nutrients or just through toxins. All of those things are important and play a role in that biological age. But I think the most exciting and promising piece of that biological age marker for fertility is that it's improvable or rewindable. We help you rewind your biological clock. And that's what I've seen both, like I said, in practice and in the research. And the other piece that we look at with our epigenetic testing specifically is toxin exposure. And I think this is a huge reason why fertility struggles are on the rise. And I'm not even going to say infertility necessarily, because I think so much of what we're seeing are truly subfertility. It's more the struggles as opposed to somebody's actually infertile or sterile, which to me is...
Can you define that again? Just like that subfertility, maybe exactly what that means?
Yeah. So technically the diagnosis of infertility is that you have tried timed intercourse for 1 year without success. Now, it doesn't tell us anything about why. It doesn't tell us anything about what's going on. It's like most diagnoses, it's just a description of the circumstances.
Yeah.
And most couples end up with unexplained infertility. Now, even if there is a disease state, so let's say somebody does get diagnosed with PCOS or there is a sperm issue that needs to be addressed. Unless it's structural, and in some cases it is, I've seen that both on the female and the male side, oftentimes improving biological age, which is cellular health, so improving the health of all of your cells, which make up your tissues, which impact your hormones, which are, everything's connected. And also that toxin exposure piece, which I'm kind of like connecting. So subfertility. So what I see in practice is that, even if somebody has a diagnosis of infertility, whether it's unexplained infertility or PCOS based or whatever it is, most of the time they're truly not infertile. Most of the time we can get 1, improvements in their biomarkers, 2, improvements in their actual health, and 3, improvements in their fertility. And I've had so many couples, hundreds of couples at this point, hundreds of babies in the US that I've helped make, where mom and dad had 3 or more rounds of IVF that had failed. And then they get pregnant naturally and have a healthy baby. I've had women in couples, who had 2 to 3 miscarriages and nobody knew what was going on. And we address like cellular health, function, like toxins, all the basic things that I do on the day to day. And they have their healthy baby. And I have some families who, it's more the optimization. They didn't really struggle. And now I think I have one family. I've helped them with 3 babies now. So I think that's my biggest family. But yeah. So that subfertility, one, can be super frustrating because most of the time the conventional diagnoses and docs don't know exactly what's going on and don't have a way to help. And but 2, it also means there's so much hope. Like there's so much that can be looked at. There's so much that can be done on the day-to-day with lifestyle medicine, with supplementation, and with mind-body medicine, which I see as such a huge component to fertility. And essentially most diseases have that mind-body component in some capacity. And to go back to like the toxin part of our epigenetics, I think that's part of the reason that we see this subfertility population growing and why couples are struggling so much is, one, there is that aging piece, but things that accelerate biological age are toxins and stress and nutrient deficiencies. So it's like, is it really the age, or is it that modern life has bombarded us with the toxic stress, the toxic toxins? Our food is more depleted than ever, and that it's really this acceleration of aging. Because there's been studies, like Dr. Cleopatra Campervine, who's a colleague and a dear friend, has shared this a little bit as well, that like our generation, like a 25-year-old of our generation is probably, as fertile as I think what like a 45-year-old of our grandmother's generation.
Oh, wow. I did not know that. I've never heard that.
I don't know if those are the exact ages, but it's, so I'll have to double check that. But like, just as a whole, our fertility is declining, even, at the ages. And like my grandma had her last baby, I think at 42 or 44. She had 9 babies. But, so it's really interesting to look at like historically and culturally, and at the same time feel this pressure of that biological clock ticking. And so we really, like, through looking at the toxins, looking at biological age, and then actually teaching people how to reverse those things, hope to give women and couples this sense of, I don't want to say control, but this sense of peace, that like you can actually relax and enjoy life and enjoy your career and enjoy dating until you meet your person, as opposed to, where I was when I first discovered the whole biological age marker. I was mid-30s, single, in LA, desperately wanting babies. I didn't think I would be a doctor this long. I was like, I'm going to get married after 3 years of being a doctor, and I'm going to be a stay-at-home mom. And like, of course, I was like, is all this debt worth it for that plan? But I'm glad I did, because that plan did not happen. And I'm very grateful to be a doctor as long as I have been. But I was feeling the pressure, and I felt like, every date I would go on, I'd be like, is this my baby daddy? Is this my baby daddy?
Yeah.
And that does not make the process enjoyable for either person.
Yeah.
And so I feel like measurably reversing my biological age and knowing that I did was a huge piece of me being able to relax and trust the journey. And knowing that like when my partner showed up, that my body would be ready and that we would be able to conceive. And like I was sharing before the interview. So I met my partner in December of 2022. We got engaged in July of 2023. We got married this past April, and we actually conceived on the first try.
I know. That makes me so happy. Oh, you're just like a product of like your own work. Everything you live, breathe, preach, right, talk about. That just makes me so happy. I'm so happy for you.
Thank you. And sometimes I'm hesitant to share because the couples who are struggling are like, well, it didn't happen for me on the first try. And, we've been trying for a year or 5 years or whatever. But I also want women to know that, like, 1, there's hope, but 2, if you plan ahead, a lot of times it can happen easily, enjoyably, like lower stress, and that it is possible. And, I'm not a one-off story. My business partner, my best friend, also conceived on the first try. I worked on my fertility. So I was 33 when I started the biological aging. And to give the whole story, I was convinced I was going to come back at 28. Like I thought I was doing everything right. Um, I came back 4 years older. So I came back at 37, had a meltdown, was like, okay, now I need to solve this for myself and for all the women out there. In 8 weeks, reversed my biological age by 2 years. And then over the next year, reversed it by an additional like 4 years. So that on my 35th birthday, I came back at 31 3/4.
Oh, nice.
And was able to kind of maintain in that range. So now I'm 30. So I got pregnant at 37, which was the age I was when I started this whole journey. But my cells are so much younger and healthier and happier. And so that was my journey. So I had spent years keeping my biological clock young. My business partner spent about 2 years working on hers before she met her partner, and they also got pregnant on the first try. And what's been really cool is in the last maybe 4 to 6 months, we've had a lot of women. And when I say a lot, I would say I could name a dozen, maybe more. Not everybody emails us to let us know.
Right.
But I could name a dozen who took our test and then within a couple of weeks emailed us back and were like, oh my God, I'm pregnant. I don't need to do your program. I'm pregnant.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. I love the success stories and hearing about them.
Thank you. And most of those, I would say of that dozen that I'm thinking of now, those were women whose biological age did come back younger and who did come back lower on the toxin side.
Yeah. Yeah, of course.
And so, and then we've also had women who've gone through the program and reversed their biological age and then they get pregnant and that sort of thing. So, I think what we see in the research of a younger biological age translates into better fertility. That's what I'm seeing in practice and with Clockwize. And so, a lot of these women who came back younger got pregnant on the first or second try, which is very exciting. So again, not to discount anybody who's struggling, this would be something to look into and to see if there are things that, if biological age is a factor for you. And a lot of times if there is PCOS, other, a disease state, endometriosis, a lot of times there is biological age acceleration with that. And it might be more complicated than just doing our basic FAST framework, which is what we recommend for, the standard woman couple to rewind that biological clock. So
yeah, we'll hop into that FAST framework too. No, thanks so much for diving in there. Again, my mind always goes back to the research on this podcast. I always like to make it so much more relatable for people. And I feel like you had just done that, which is great. So hopefully you all are enjoying who's listening. But yeah, it's great that you're also seeing, hey, what I'm reading, what I'm researching, right, is exactly what I'm practicing and what I'm seeing from a clinical standpoint too. I actually think, and we've made many strides in the epigenetic field, I would say, to start getting there. It's still a little bit difficult, but biological age is just one component, right? It's really nice because it's this overall score someone gets, they can be younger or older and then take action. So everything is kind of tied up into that one score. It's really your entire cellular health, right? Down to that individual cell type level. I think it would be so interesting, and they've done this before with some epigenetic markers for type 2 diabetes, for example. There's a paper out there that talks about type 2 diabetes, and then there's 4 subgroups or subcategories of type 2 diabetes of why you actually have a propensity for that particular disease. So where my mind's going is I'm we're so close to probably to probably say, okay, hey, maybe your biological age is this, but here's maybe why you may have been struggling to get pregnant, right? Some breakdown of why. I think that would be so interesting and obviously give more actionable information too.
And we're working on that. So right now, the way I do that is through additional testing in practice. So this isn't the only test that I recommend for patients or for clients, but through Clockwize, we've created this as a first step, direct to consumer. Anybody can order it, simple finger prick at home. You get your results, you get instructions, you get community, you get resources. We've got, a lot built out. But for couples who are struggling, they typically need a more thorough workup. So a deeper look at hormones, a deeper look at metabolic health. And we might still be starting with the foundations of the FAST framework, but usually there's something more specific that also needs to be addressed. This month, the theme in my practice has been sperm. I'm, there's different waves that move through.
Yeah.
But what we're working on, we're actually, raising funds at the moment for this, is to do to create our own algorithm that we're calling the fertility predictability algorithm. And so the first iteration of this is just that predictability portion. And so partnering, we have a couple of different organizations, Dr. Cleopatra's group. There's a fertility clinic group on the East Coast that we're connected to get outcome data. So just seeing, looking at, we're between the CpG DNA methylation sites and then the proteomics and metabolomics that are available for somebody who wants to sit down and look at all those, which, at some point we will. With that outcome data, then we could create that predictability algorithm of you have X percentage chance of getting pregnant, in the next 4 to 6 weeks or in this next cycle or with this next IVF round or whatever. But then we take, we do a before and after. So typically it's 3 to 3 months minimum to, because from the time an egg and a sperm start developing till when they actually come out of the body to meet, it's about a 3-month process. And then, but that's also kind of been consistent with the epigenetic research. I think 8 weeks tends to be like the shortest window that people are retesting at. So having people do the test, do their, follow whether it's our protocol or Dr. Cleopatra's protocol, whoever, whether we're working with one of the acupuncturists, and then doing a post-test and then seeing those couples who then get pregnant right away and being able to compare. So we've got essentially 2 million data points for this couple before, 2 million data points for this couple after. Then we know that outcome and we can look at that delta and see, okay, so what markers are significant, what shifted, what improved, and then what are those connected back to lifestyle-wise? What can we actually do about those?
Yeah.
And so that's probably years down the road at this point. Step one is
I think it's closer. Hopefully it's closer, but no, that data and that information is like gold, right? You have to get the information first, and it takes time, right? Like egg and sperm meet, you need to wait 3 months. There's steps and there's a process that has to be put in play, and then there's the follow-up data too. That's like what's most important. But I think the reason I say I think it might take a little bit quicker too is because the follow-up data doesn't have to be, a year or 10 years down the road. It literally just has to be like, hey, are they pregnant? Are they not pregnant? Right? What did they do beforehand?
Yeah.
But more interestingly enough, it would be super cool to then track like that child, right? The next generation too. So you're building that biobank, right? You're looking at what's being passed down through those epigenetic markers. So super, super cool. Figured you all, already had something in the works for that too.
Yeah. So just in case any investors are listening or any practitioners who want to support in the research, we are, we're fundraising. We're looking for research partners, universities, clinics, et cetera, to get as much data as possible as quickly as possible. Yep. So feel free to reach out. You can reach me at drz@clockwize.com, so that we could, because what I see with the potential for this algorithm first is that just that predictability algorithm could be a great first diagnostic for a fertility workup in an OBGYN office as part of an annual exam. Let's say I'm a 30-year-old female. I know I don't want kids yet, but I know I want them someday. Right now we don't have great markers for that. We have like an AMH, which, maybe FSH, estradiol, progesterone, perhaps, 7 days post-ovulation, some inflammatory markers. But to actually have, to have something in that moment that could predict, okay, maybe you've got 5 more years of good fertility or 12 more years of good fertility, and then know exactly what we need to do to prolong that reproductive window is life-changing, industry-changing, humanity-changing. So that's what we're working towards.
I know. I want to say that it kind of surprises me that we don't have something like that already, but with, again, just women's health not being a focus and kind of the larger picture, I can't say it does, right? But again, just how it's kind of a crisis right now, right? I think in China even, or even just larger Asia, they're not having children, right? Younger people aren't having children. More people are going to be much older. And it's going to cause, I think, some really, really large societal economic based shifts. That is quite literally, I think, has been called a crisis in several, articles that I've read as well. So this is definitely going to be needed in the future. I'm excited to see how we roll that out.
Definitely.
Let's hop back into Clockwise in the offer. So we've kind of been hinting at it a little bit. So again, at Clockwise, you have this Fertility Wise Test. It's called it's your all signature test. It looks at biological age, how fast you're aging in this moment, and then it also looks at exposure to fertility toxins through your Clock Tox panel. And then you've also mentioned several times too your FAST framework. So, things you can start doing to actually rewind the clock. Let's walk through this in steps. I think people are probably really familiar with like the biological age, the pace of aging that you all do. Let's start with the fertility toxins. Can you talk about some of those that you measure? And then, what you would recommend for each of those two, depending on those outcomes.
Yeah. So we look at 9 fertility toxins. I would love to look at a million more, but with the data that we had, I basically had to like email with this lab out of Europe to get their raw data, such as this algorithm. And we did. It was great. So we have, reliable, accurate data via DNA methylation that was also run with this urine toxin panel, to be able to say whether or not you're being exposed to these 9 fertility toxins. So we look at propylparaben, we look at BPA, we look at BPF, so the bisphenols are those two, and then we look at 6 different phthalates. And as a group, these toxins have all, mostly individually and also combined, been shown to increase time to conception. So meaning it takes longer. People are like trying for more and more months before they actually get pregnant naturally. They accelerate ovarian aging, meaning they're actually aging your ovaries faster, shortening that reproductive window, which then causes fertility struggles, decreases ovarian reserve. So you're losing eggs faster, and then decreases egg quality. And in the IVF studies, decreases the eggs that they get, decreases the healthy embryos that they get, and then can potentially also decrease the live birth rate. And in the IVF world, the like gold standard is a singleton live birth. So you have like one healthy baby at the end of 9 months after that whole fertility journey. And these toxins in both mom and dad have negative reproductions on that fertility journey. Some of them also, we have some transgenerational data that, and it's a little bit different whether mom's exposed or dad's exposed. But what's also really kind of crazy and cool to me is that, if dad's exposed, he's not carrying baby. So his exposure is only happening to the sperm. It's not happening to the fetus. So we know that it's epigenetic. And so when dad's exposed before conception, there's a couple of things that are checked. So like certain phthalate exposure can increase baby's risk of different respiratory issues in childhood. But we also see a number of these toxins linked to behavior and neurological development, especially in baby boys. And then there's some with mom and some with dad as well. But again, like the crazy part to me is like dad's sperm was exposed. Fetus is not exposed. We know those genes it's that gene alteration. And with mom, we have a little bit, oftentimes there's a harder time delineating, okay, what's simply epigenetic based on that just the egg was exposed, because oftentimes that's still going to be in her during pregnancy. So, but either way, it's like we want these toxins as low as possible during pregnancy as well, because that fetus being exposed, it's still turning genes on and off, and can potentially increase risk of asthma, allergies, obesity, even cancer rates in kids, endocrine disorders. Some of these in baby boys can cause changes in genitalia. I mean, unfortunately, the list goes on. The more research
super long. So I'm thinking in the back of my head, I'm like, what the heck do you do about it? Like, I really do. I feel like I think about this a lot. It's like a shower thought, or, before I'm going to bed, where I'm like, okay, I know there's toxins. You see it like everywhere on social media. Again, all these articles that I'm reading, I feel like they're everywhere. Like, is it possible to actually start to get rid of them? Like, what do you do?
So step 1 is avoidance. And we have yet to have a sample that has 0 toxins in it. So and that's both with the Clockwize Clock Tox panel, but also what I've seen in practice when I'm running, 100 different toxins on a urine panel is nobody has zero toxin exposure. So the goal is to control what we can control without losing our minds. And what I say, minimize that toxin exposure. So making the healthier choices where you can, and the biggest impact is going to be the things you do every day. So that's typically the things in your house. Now, if you're going out and getting a Starbucks every day and drinking a hot coffee through a soft plastic lid, then that would be an exposure to change. So starting at home, starting with the things you use every day, getting rid of as much plastic as possible. Even the stuff that says BPA, anything BPA free is either going to have BPS or BPF. So the different bisphenols, which are just as bad, if not worse. They just don't have all the data published yet saying that they're just as bad or worse. So because we don't know, they think they're safe, but they're not. And so BPF has been one that we've seen so much show up on our test in our population who's doing everything right. So like I just did a podcast with a real big like food and toxin influencer. And she came back with BPF and she's like, where is this coming from? Like everything is clean. Like I only eat at Erewhon and all of this. And we're like, okay, well, could it be like the lining in the to-go food containers at Erewhon? Because if it's really paper, something's going to leak through. And she was also drinking a lot of sparkling water out of a can. And those cans have a plastic lining. So it might say BPA free, but there's going to be that BPF in it. So even somebody who thinks they're doing everything perfectly. Now, the other hopeful piece is, even though we can't avoid everything, our bodies are intelligent. They're built to handle some toxic burden if we don't overload them and if we support our natural detoxification systems. And certain nutrients help mitigate these epigenetic toxin exposures. So specifically folate and some of those other methylation nutrients, and a lot of that is based on the work of Dr. Kara Fitzgerald and her like methylation diet, and EGCG. So like EGCG and folate are probably there's a lot of research on those, and have been shown to kind of combat the epigenetic negative impact of not just the toxins that we test for, but also things like PCBs, which are detrimental to fertility and health and yada, yada, yada. And, the bigger things now that I'd love to be able to test for as soon as we can are like the PFAs and like the microplastics, the nanoplastics, those sorts of things, because like phthalates, for example, we typically think plastics and fragrances. And people who don't use fragrances and people who think they're not using plastics still come up with at least one phthalate. Like I don't think we've ever had zero phthalates on a panel. And they're like, where am I getting this from? And they're like, I even have a cotton shower curtain. Like it's not even like, it's like one of those. And it's like, well, supposedly most Americans are consuming about a credit card worth of plastic. I don't know if that's like a day, a week, or a month or what that is, but there's plastic in us. So is it something, we're currently being exposed to, or is it something that like is just in our bodies that's having to be processed and is showing up? Some of these questions we're still trying to delineate. And I'm also kind of trying to figure out, with some of the phthalates and especially like with fragrances, like it's rare that I'll walk into a Nordstrom, but on the occasion I need to like get a gift or something. I'll go into one of these department stores and they still have a fragrance department. And you walk through, and it might be a 30-second walk through the fragrance department, but it's like, is that enough to trigger this, to impact my epigenetics? And the answer is, I don't know. And like, how long would that show up for? I don't know yet. So I think a lot of these questions, and I have some patients who are very, I don't want to say neurotic because I love them and I feel like neurotic is negative, but very precise in wanting to know, and wanting to know like exactly what they should be doing and eating and touching and not doing and all of that. And I think that can actually create more stress in the body, which is not a good thing for biological age or fertility. And so there is this balance of like, you do the best you can 80% of the time. And if you walk through the fragrance aisle, just know that your body can handle it and build that resilience and build that knowing that you are healthy, you are strong, you've done everything else right. Like this is not going to impact you in any significant way.
focusing on those thoughts more. I know, because I was even at like Home Goods, or I don't know, it was like TJ Maxx, Marshalls, one of those chains, and like walked through like even the candle section. And I was like, whoa, like I got a headache instantly. I mean, I always do. I mean, it's just like overpowering of all of these fragrances and scents and things like that. So I know that's something we have to be careful with as well. But yeah, I think, being positive about it in some light, hey, I am doing the best I can, there's I'll always try to be the best I can, giving yourself a little bit of a break and being able to talk yourself off of that ledge and not increase that stress. You're right, probably does more good than it does harm at that point. All right, let's hop into Dr. Zagone. We're getting to the end here, but I still want to talk about the FAST framework that you have on the reporting as well. So I know we've mentioned that. What does that stand for? Do you want to go through those points and kind of maybe generalize some of those recommendations that you would give to someone?
Yes, definitely. So we've got our F's, our A, our S's, and our T's. Spells fast. And so we help you rewind the biological clock fast. So our F's are food, fasting, and fitness. So food-wise, we tend to lean towards Dr. Kara Fitzgerald's Younger You food protocol. And also more on the, on the fertility side of things, those both really align, supporting great levels of folate, supporting your methylation nutrients. And I would say like the two biggest pieces that I would say most people aren't already doing is getting, like 4 to 5 colors of different, veggies and some fruits in every day. And then the second piece would be organ meats like liver. So my hack for the liver, I'm obsessed with Pluck. I don't know if you've tried Pluck, Hannah. I have no affiliation with them. I have no financial agreement with them. I just adore them.
Yeah.
It's a seasoning blend that's dehydrated, ground up grass-fed beef organs mixed with herbs and spices. Literally tastes like a seasoning blend, but you're getting benefits of the organs.
You know what? I have heard about this. I've seen it somewhere, like maybe like 9 to 12 months ago. Even I think I've seen it somewhere. So you'd recommend that? You like that?
I love that. I mean, because most
Got
people
it.
aren't going to actually cook and eat liver. The other thing I've tried are the carnivore crisps, which are like the liver chips basically. And those were doable. But most people, again, like are going to be, it's a pungent flavor. So I really do love that Pluck, and they have like different flavors and everything. I mix it with Greek yogurt and eat it like a French onion dip with like carrots and cucumbers and whatnot.
Yeah, that sounds good.
And I've used it to season a steak. I've used it, I use it a couple times a week. It's great. I love it. So that's one of my little hacks for the food piece. On the fasting side of things, what I think is so interesting about fasting, and it's what the first thing I think that's so interesting is that in Kara Fitzgerald's studies, she's not having anybody do anything crazy. Like they're not doing, 3-day water fast, 18-6 intermittent fast. It's literally a 12-12 of like, just don't eat for 12 hours. Like, have dinner,
Right.
have dinner by, be done by 7. Don't have breakfast until after 7 the next day. Like totally doable. Great for the digestive tract, like very basic medicine. And that showed, that was part of the helpful protocol where they had great reversal results.
Mm-hmm.
So I typically have my clients, couples, and women start there. On the fertility side of things, fasting in some cases can be incredibly beneficial, and in other cases can be incredibly detrimental. So it's a little bit more individualized. We also tend to recommend timing it to your cycle depending on what you're doing. But the 12-12 is doable and safe and healthy for everybody. And then we also we have a functional medicine practitioner who does all of our lab reviews for our anybody who takes our test. And she's certified for Fast Like a Girl. So she helps, figure out, is fasting the right thing for you or not? And then how to do it with your cycle safely, healthfully, so you're not hurting your fertility, you're actually helping fertility. So that's the fasting piece. And then fitness. So again, the research is like, just move your body. Like move your body consistently, move your body enough. And so some people are frustrated with our recommendations because while they're research-based, they're like, well, what am I supposed to do? And it's like, well, are you already doing the basics? Are you getting 30 minutes a day in of movement? You're not? Okay, we'll do that.
Yeah.
And somebody wants like, well, what strength regimen should I do? And it's like, what do you like to do? Like, make this enjoyable, like create your life, like have fun with it. And so, and that's actually something I should speak to is sometimes people take our test and they're expecting a very like personalized, customized report based on their epigenetics. And there are gene tests out there that are telling people, these are the macronutrients you should eat. These are the micronutrients you should eat. This is how you should exercise based on your genes. This is not that test. And I don't know, we're not going to go into that, but everything that we share is research-based. And the beauty of that is like, you get to create what works for your life. Like, I'm not going to tell everybody go do a 3-day water fast.
Yeah.
So there's this
I always tell people it's newer than the first iPhone, right? Like just wait. The recommendations, right, will come. But it's still all research based. Everything you just named, right? So
Yep.
I'm totally on board there with you. So that makes sense. Yeah. For the F, you have food, fasting, fitness. Did I miss anything else?
That's it. And then
That's
we've got associated conditions. So this is where more of those medical conditions come in. So, this could be like if somebody has the MTHFR mutation, they're going to have a propensity to have a higher biological age. That was me. That was probably part of my reasoning and my stress. But, and that I was so resistant to fasting. But I, managed to figure that all out. This could be something like PCOS. This could be a luteal phase defect. This could be an autoimmune condition, Hashimoto's. So these are things that you're going to need to work one-on-one with a practitioner on that in most cases are reversible, healable, manageable, but that might have a more direct impact on biological age and fertility. And we want to make sure they're handled. Then our S's are sleep, stress, supplementation. So sleep, we go through basic sleep hygiene. You want to make sure you're waking refreshed, sleeping through the night, and that you're, pitch black room, sending the right light signals at the right times of day. Stress is a huge one. In fact, we have a fertility age inventory that we give to people after they get their results so they can figure out where do they start in the FAST framework. Because if you're trying to do all of the letters at the same time, that's more stressful. And I would say the stress and trauma sections, like 70% of people, that's where they need to start. Because on that stress side, that can be something like, let's say you eat 3 meals a day. So you're getting the epigenetic input of food 3 times per day. Those thoughts are in your head all day long. That doesn't mean you're feeling stress all day long, but that seems to be the highest impact point for most people. And again, in the research, a lot of it is just taking 20 minutes a day to breathe, to meditate, to like a focused relaxation, not like a Netflix binge or a scroll, because that's not true, like relaxation and rest. So it can be super, super simple. And then the stress and trauma connection piece, because trauma is one of our T's. Sometimes the best thing to do is to dive deeper into, well, where is that stress response actually coming from? Is it coming from like I'm overscheduling myself? So that's one thing. But like, why am I doing that? And I'll actually share the crazy thing that I realized on my journey is I was working so hard. So I was seeing patients in LA. I don't know. I felt like 1 million hours a week, but I was like seeing patients on weekends and doing house calls. And because I was also doing like IVs and a lot of in-person stuff, not just like the virtual fertility consults. And it's like, I could have said no, but I felt compelled that I needed to do all of these things. So I had to look deeper of like, well, where is this actually coming from? And as I explored, I'm like, oh, I feel like if I have to have all my student loans paid off. So I have to make all this money because I have to be a stay-at-home mom. And I'm like, well, where is that coming from? And it's like, oh, well, my mom was a stay-at-home mom and was very judgmental of moms who worked. So if I'm not a stay-at-home mom, my mom's going to think I'm a bad mom and then I'm a bad person. So it was like this whole spiral of subconscious stuff that I didn't even realize was running my life and running me into the ground. And it was kind of this crazy moment on the phone with my dad where he's like, it's not the end of the world if you work when you have your baby. Like, everybody does it these days. And I was like,
Yeah.
well, then why does it feel like the end of the world? And that's where I was like, oh, this comes back to my mom. And like, it didn't come out so like simple and packaged like that. But once I was able to realize like, okay, I don't have to have all of life figured out and paid for before I have my baby. I can relax and I can say no.
Doing
and
some of that inner work. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I feel like that's such a transformational piece if somebody can go there and do that. And sometimes that takes the right support. So that's like the stress and trauma. And then supplementation, we don't make a ton of recommendations supplementation wise. I know you guys have like a great chart of like the research of like which clocks are moved by which, supplements and interventions and things. We make a few recommendations, but I feel like that should be a more customized recommendation. So we say, we don't start with supplementation. Get your food right, get your sleep right, get your stress right. And then there's some things you can add, and that might be more specific to your associated conditions.
Sure.
And so we make some of the basic recommendations like the NAD precursors, EGCG green tea, stuff like that. So sleep, stress, supplementation, and then toxins and trauma. And so toxins, like I mentioned, the avoidance, supporting your own detox pathways, whether that's through sweating, movement, making sure you're having good bowel movements, hydration and urination, good breath. And then there's, all sorts of fun detox things you could take if you need to. But then also making sure you are getting enough of the right nutrients because then your body knows what to do and can get rid of a lot of those things. So that's our FAST framework. Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks for walking through it and giving specific examples too. I think that's super helpful for listeners. Gosh, I feel like I could literally talk to you all day. I find this like the epigenetics, the fertility world so interesting. But we covered so much ground, and then maybe when we get some of that newer research out too, we can definitely have another conversation here. Let's see. So my last question, I think you may know it too, that I ask everyone on the podcast, Dr. Zagone, is if you could be any animal in this world, what would you be and why?
Oh, I don't even remember. I don't remember this question. In this moment, the animal that's coming through is an elephant.
Ooh.
And I feel, and part of this might be because I'm like 6 months pregnant and like am calling this energy into my life of like very like grounded, peaceful, but like big energy, big presence. Not the king of the jungle. There's no like ferocity, but like peaceful, grounded, big energy. Like that's what I'm feeling with the elephant.
Yeah, and they have like a softness to them too, right? Like everyone like loves elephants. They're very playful too. I like it. We'll go with elephant for now.
What's your animal?
No one has ever actually asked me in return. So this is interesting for those who have made it to the end. It was funny. I just had a bunch of friends ask the same question too. I'm like, it's the same thing I ask on the end of my podcast. I would choose a whale shark.
Okay.
I just think, I don't know. I just like them. Definitely something in the ocean. And I feel like whale sharks, they're just like so big and cute and almost similar in a way to like an elephant, like have this big presence, but they're still so gentle. And I've been to the Atlanta Aquarium where they have like a whale shark there, and they're just like so cool. I want to swim with one day.
Aww.
I don't know. I just pick whale shark, I guess. Yeah.
Awesome. Love it.
Thanks for asking. Yeah. Cool. And you also, Dr. Zagone gave your email out earlier too, but just for everyone who's made it to the end, if anyone wants to connect with you or reach out, I know, Clockwize is on, you have a website, you have your social media too, but how do you want people to get a hold of you?
So if you're interested in the test, you can get it at clockwize.com. That's with a Z because I'm Dr. Z. You can follow us on Instagram at Clockwize Fertility. And if you want to connect directly for, research purposes, funding, any of that sort of fun stuff, email me directly at dr.z@clockwize.com. And if you have any other questions about the test, about what we do, you can reach out at info@clockwize.com.
Awesome. Thank you. We'll put all that in the show notes too. Well, thanks everyone for joining us at the Everything Epigenetics podcast. Remember, you have control over your epigenetics, so tune in next time to learn more about how. Thanks, Dr. Zagone.
Thank you, Hannah.